Hey everybody, it's Synth Designer here again, and I'm continuing my series of Synthwave Essentials. Again, I just wanted to mention this is part of a series based on my preset packs that you could get on my website. So check out the links down below. And again, these are completely free. There's no signups, no strings attached. Go out and get them. So let's get into this one. Now, I label this one as a pad, but this could be a lead very easily. And here's how it sounds. So it's got that very characteristic synthwave sound to it. A lot of resonance that gives it that character. So let's see how we make it. So to start, we have all three oscillators at work here, including the sub. What you'll notice a lot in a lot of synthwave music is that the wave shapes are often very simple. So we're using a basic saw, a square, or maybe a variation of a square here, and another saw on the sub. And it's all filtered out, and we even have the noise going here. So the only kind of tweak you could see is that there's unison on the saw wave. So I like to dial it up to about 4, give it a little bit of a stereo sound to it, but not too much. The next thing we can look at here is the fine. As you'll see, a lot of my presets have an LFO link to it. So I link the LFO to the fine to give it that kind of wavy type of character. So let's see how we bypass it. Yeah, it sounds okay. Let's put it back on. And if you can see if I put it all the way up, it has that weird sound. But when we turn it down, gives it that slight wobbliness to it, which is kind of indicative of a lot of vintage synthesizers. So let's move down here and take a look at the envelopes and the LFO. We just mentioned that the LFO is just basically working on the fine knob, so it's not really doing too much other than that. And I like to keep the envelopes pretty similar. Just a bit of decay here, and the sustain is not all the way up, and a little bit of release. This is kind of an important part because if we take the release down, really cuts out the sound quickly, so we just want a tiny bit of a tail here. That gives it just a nice finish to it. So let's go back up and take a look at the filter. Now the filter is really important here. Basically gives it the entire character. So I attached envelope 2 here to the cutoff, and let's just take the filter off and see what happens. Completely different sound, very buzzy, just completely different. But when we turn it on, gives it that character. So part of it is the envelope opening. If we bypass it, it'll be a lot darker, you'll see. Very low. But here, gives it that nice, cool sound to it. One thing I should mention that's really important is the resonance. It kind of gives it that very characteristic sound, you know, the Daft Punk kind of lead. Very, very plain without it. That's what it is when it's a little bit exaggerated. And here's where I had it before, roughly. Yes. And I also didn't mention before, but let's go back to it and talk about the other two oscillators that we had on. So the sub just adds a little bit of a kind of extra layer to it. Sounds fine, but when you want a little bit more character, a little bit of a bottom end will help it. You can also just turn it off very easily and say that might work in your mix. So just up to you. And the noise here, let's turn off the other oscillators and listen to it. Yeah, just that little bit. That adds just that kind of whooshiness to the sound as far as I could describe. And that kind of helps it. It's very subtle, barely in the mix. You could turn it up a little bit. To me, that's a little bit too high. So I like to keep it around here. It's subtle, but it makes a difference. It's there. Now let's go over to the effects. The effects, again, you'll see a lot of my sounds are pretty simple in terms of the effects. I often use a variation of distortion, chorus, reverb, and delay. Sometimes EQ, of course, compression. But those are your main kind of sounds that you want to hear in Synthwave, especially these three. Distortion I use pretty subtly. You can hear it definitely gives a little bit of a drive to it. Just a little bit though, not too much. We're getting a little bit too crunchy there, I think. So I don't like to put it all the way up in the mix. Chorus, again, really low in the mix here. Just adds a little bit of dimension. All these things add up though, you know, it's not always going to be like right in your face, but just enough. And then the reverb and delay, you could obviously hear. Sounds very dry without any reverb. But again, I don't have it very high in the mix. And delay as well, you could hear it. It's kind of a little bit dead without it. Just a little bit. So that's the sound there. I call it the standard because it's very common to hear some sort of variation of this in a lot of synthwave music. So hope you enjoy, and remember to go out and download it. It's completely free. No signups required. See you next time.